if anyone is listening and wants to see this carrot, let us know and we'll send you a picture.
Hello and welcome to the First4LCFC podcast. My name is Jamie Thorpe and I'm delighted to say that we have the original band back together as I'm joined by both Christian Mosen and finally back with the one and only Ed But-Noon. How are you both?
What a reunion it is just to have that introduction from you, Jamie.
Well, Jamie, if you were interested enough to listen last week, it's not that long since I've been here. It's been about 7 days, so just listen to the podcast, please.
Actually, I think we didn't we lay some bait for Jamie in last? I can't even remember, but in last week's podcast to see if he actually listens to the end.
Austin sent me a DM on the side chat and said that you two weren't up to much in it, so I haven't listened yet.
That's a racy comment.
That is audacious.
Imagine the world's most polite man, otherwise known as Austin, just came out with that. No, sorry, Austin. No, obviously, you didn't say something. I haven't listened to it yet. I don't
think you ever will now.
I think it's because Ed told me that I got a load of stick in it immediately, and I was like, no, I don't need that in my life. But listen, the good news is we're all back. Hopefully, going to get you two having a bit of an argument with each other as opposed to just directing abuse at me. And we'll look forward to that. So, listen. A few weeks back, I think, we're going way, way back when we were last on this and we were doing our predictions. I don't think we would have ever thought that we would head into the international break top of both our Europa League group and the Premier League. But this is the frankly fantastic position we find ourselves in. So let's have a quick talk about the former competition. So last week, we completely demolished Braga, 4-0 at home, 100% record continues in the Europa League campaign. So, Ed, I mean, how important was that win, especially as they're supposed to be seems our biggest challenges in our Europa League group?
Well, it's great, obviously. Like, played 3, won 3. Just, like you said, the team who's supposed to be our biggest challengers. We are really now only a couple of results away from not only just guaranteeing through to the next round, but guaranteeing top spot, which will come in handy, no doubt, as we should get easier sort of draw. So both in terms of the competition itself, but also momentum, it's like you really cannot complain with that, can you?
No. I mean, there's not really anything that we could look at that game and say that didn't go well, is there? I mean, but Chris, there's a few guys that came into the team that we haven't seen a huge amount of. Obviously, the likes of Chowdhury, Luke Thomas got a rare appearance. Did any of the people coming in particularly impress you and make you think actually these guys should be fighting for a starting place?
The question I was dreading being asked. No, Thursday just seems like a long time ago. I'm struggling to remember yesterday's match. Never mind Thursdays. But I don't know really. I think you've asked the wrong guy. But from what I remember, I can't remember anyone having like a subpar performance. I think the fact that Luke Thomas has obviously, retained his place in the team for Wolves. You can interpret it that way. You can interpret it as a lack of other options. But I was pleased watching it. I think we made it look very comfortable. I mean, naturally, you're going to compare the result against Braga with the one against Zorya, and you'd expect the two scorelines to be reversed. But I don't know. I think it is massively down to confidence, and I think we alluded to it in last week's podcast that maybe teams that are going to do well this year just have to find that form and just run with it, because obviously as Leicester fans we're going to be thinking about last season, saying that before Christmas we'd have been having the same conversation and how it bombed in the second half. But we call upon these fringe players and they're all delivering. So like I said last week, there's obviously a good morale in the squad that these players are ready and willing to perform when asked.
I mean, Big Ian Nacho, cementing his reputation as one of the deadliest strikers in Europe. I think that's 3 goals and 3 assists.
I want to make a point. Go on. I'll let Chris do it because he jumped in first there.
I know. I think VAR, my armpit was just over the line. But Ian Nacho, get the controversial klaxon out. I'm not impressed. I'm still not impressed.
So last 2 games in the Europa League, 3 goals, 3 assists.
I'm not impressed. And Kelechi, I'm going to tell you why I'm not impressed. I just don't feel he fits the system. We're pushing, a player into a system that needs to be more fluid. He needs to just be. It just doesn't seem like he fits the bill. Like his goal, obviously, he's putting the ball in back in the net. He's creating goals, but even then, it's sort of bundled over the line. More of like being in the right place at the right time, sort of thing. It just doesn't seem. It's an unfair criticism, probably, and people are probably disagreeing with me right now. But I just feel like he almost slows us down, and I don't feel as comfortable with him being the leading man as maybe someone even like Harvey Barnes, someone who's just got that pace, just to keep the move flowing. Really, he's neat with a ball at his feet, but he's similar to Perez in the way that I just feel like when he gets on the ball, other players in the opposition are going to catch up. And there's a reason why he might not perform like that in the Premier League, because the standard is a little bit lower in Europe at the moment.
I mean, Ed, was that what you were going to say as well? Were you going to jump in and?
Well, I was just going to blow my own trumpet, to be honest.
On air.
I'm on air. Do you remember our predictions last week?
Oh, here we go. Never mentioned until he gets one right.
I said we'd score 4 and Kelechi and Acho would score first.
You did, to be fair. It was a big shout.
I also said we'd beat Wolves to 0 and Vardy would score first. I did say it would be 2-0 and Vardy missed the penalty. But I'm currently on a roll, so if anyone wants the lottery numbers up next, I'm willing to give you one on air. But just thought I'd pat myself on the back because no one else is going to do it for me.
That is a valid point. You did, predict half a result, which
Chris said it would be an extremely big statement if we were to score 4 against Braga. He got excited at the prospect.
I don't remember saying that, but I'll take you as a reliable source. Is that what I said? I mean,
yeah, I guarantee. Ask Jamie; he would have listened, wouldn't he? No?
Looking back, I mean, I have to stand by that because, Braga haven't often been put away for 4 in Europe from my limited research last week. So it's got to count for something. But imagine if Vardy played, it could have been 6, 7. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a statement. Stat being that's the first time we've scored 4 goals in Europe since our first ever match in Europe when we won 4-1 against Glenavon. Massive team, obviously. But talking of the other players that came in, because I know you said you didn't necessarily have anyone, stand out. I personally thought it was Hamza Chowdhury's probably best game I've seen him have in a Leicester shirt. I thought he was excellent. He sort of lost that headless chicken approach. But was there anything about Under that caught your eye? Because obviously he's made an impact off the bench, but he was given an opportunity to start this game and played 60 minutes. What did you make of him? And this goes to Chris because I know Ed didn't watch.
That's what I need you to awkwardly say that Ed didn't watch the game. But I feel like I didn't watch the game either.
Don't need to watch it. I said we'd score 4 and I said Kelechi would win. I said Kelechi would score and we'd score 4 and win. So why do I need to watch it when my predictions are so accurate?
Did you say Braga were going to score?
I said we'd score 4. I don't care if they score.
What if they score 5?
Yeah, exactly.
What did you think of Under, Chris?
Yeah, no, he was really direct, wasn't he? Yeah. No, I mean, I honestly don't remember what he did. Honestly, don't remember what he did, and yeah.
He's probably fast.
That's what I said. Direct. Is that the one thing we can discount?
Direct is synonymous with fast.
The First4LCFC podcast, your place for in-depth Leicester City analysis. Yeah, I liked it when Under kicked that ball. Right, so look,
Jamie, what do you think was good about him?
I thought that he was very direct, but also the way he came in off his wing. He
was fast as well.
He ran. I thought he was very, very good on the ball, but he showed the willingness to get back, help out defensively. But he was a threat, and I think that although I'm slightly concerned about whether he's going to suit the system Rodgers wants to play going forward.
Well, this is what I mean. I have got something actually potent to add here to gain back some credibility, and it is about the balance of. Oh, excuse me. Sounds like someone sat in a hurricane here. Someone breathing down the microphone loudly. But no, in terms of the balance, I don't feel like can you play a player like Under with a wing back, or is that just too much? Sort of down one side potentially. I don't know. We're obviously going to go on to talking about our fantasy 11 if you like, but yeah, I don't know. It'd be a shame to see Under only utilise as sort of an impact sub, but at the same time, he's a great impact to have, isn't he? Because obviously, his legs are tiring towards the end of the game. We've seen him do it on 2 occasions already in the Prem. Come on and get an assist purely on the counter attack as well. So. And then obviously, if he gets opportunities in Europe, I'm sure he'll be satisfied with that level of game time in his first season.
Yeah, I mean, he added that sort of touch of quality that we've been crying out for from the likes of Demarai Gray in recent years, hasn't he? I mean, Gray, good on the ball, good running at players, but always seems flat at the crucial moment. Under certainly hasn't done that when he's needed to, has he? But okay, so let's talk about the Wolves game. And hope that you two have something to say on it. So, look, we have now obviously look, Chris. We have alluded to this already, but we're now we've bettered our start from the 15-16 season. Pundits are starting to slowly come around to the idea that Leicester might actually be quite good at football, and obviously jumping on the bandwagon a little bit. And we're heading into the break top. So, I mean, the phrase "title challenges" is being bandied around. It's not something I necessarily agree with. But what's your reaction to this? Are you happy to see Leicester being considered, or do you think this is much too soon?
Of course, I'm happy to see it being considered, but I still don't think we get anywhere as much recognition as what I think we deserve. But in a sort of similar way to 15, 16, I think that sort of works in our favour, and it's almost good to be sort of under the radar. Again, last week I alluded to the fact that it's against these sorts of teams that might have a bit of a game plan to sort of sit in and see how we break them down. And these are the games that we might find a bit trickier, which the scoreline might reflect. I mean, some may argue that it should have been more. But for me, we were gritty, we were determined, we kept a clean sheet, in no small part down to a fantastic save from Kasper Schmeichel as well, which is, it goes to show that, that is just as important as a striker bagging one at the other end. But for me, it was just the discipline in performance. It was a discipline in the game management. It was a discipline in the substitutions. And ultimately just figuring out your opponent, because, Wolves they're not any slouches, are they? They play a good game, and like I said, for me, sometimes you get more satisfaction out of these ground out 1-0s than you do out of an emphatic sort of 4-0, because you feel like you didn't really have to work for that one at all against Braga, for example.
I mean, the phrase that you use there, grinding out the result is quite key, because it wasn't necessarily the most flattering of wins. It wasn't particularly pretty at times, but Ed, is it quite important that Leicester add the ability, that they seem to have added the ability to grind out these results in that way? It's something that we were criticised for last year, was not being able to sort of put away the difficult games in particular.
Yeah, I think if you listen to last week's podcast, somebody predicted it would be a tight game because they don't really concede or create much, and we would have to take our chances when they came. And that person who predicted that had very good foresight, and it did come true. But I see this as a really big result, to be fair, because whilst we're obviously flying high, if we're being realistic, Wolves are, I know Chris likes to say, and it's not played on paper, but Wolves are just about our biggest rivals in the league. And, I didn't feel that they had many chances to score. And we've eked out a result. It is a 6-pointer. Now we've got that 5-point gap on them. There's already a nice gap ahead of teams like Man U and Arsenal this year, and we're more than capable of throwing it away later in the year, as proven last year. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. But these wins against teams that are going to be in and around us, likely to be anyway, it really is a solid start to the season.
I mean, solid. Yeah, I mean, we've obviously had the 2 losses that came as a bit of a surprise, and then I think that's what people are sort of pointing to when they say, well, actually, despite all the good stuff they're doing, Leicester, they're not the complete package yet. But I mean, a lot of people are sort of discounting the amount of injuries that we've had. I mean, I know following the Leeds win, the first thing they pointed to is the fact they were missing the likes of Phillips and Rafinha or whatever. But despite the fact that we're missing our entire first choice back line, I'm just going to ignore whatever that was. Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. But look, Chris, what do you make of Rodgers' handling of the squad? Is what I was trying to come around to. The fact that we have done so well with what most other teams would consider an injury crisis.
Firstly, I think on paper we'd all say that the defeat against Aston Villa was unexpected or, a bit of a disappointment. But, in hindsight now, they've pulled out some great results themselves, haven't they? I mean, maybe in the way in which we lost wasn't ideal. I don't think we really performed at all on the night. But, I mean, they're up there as well. They're only 3 points behind us with an identical goal scored and against. So, maybe we look back at that and think it's only West Ham now where we really disappointed ourselves. But ultimately, in answer to your question, in terms of squad rotation, I feel that maybe this is the year, like 3rd time lucky. Obviously, the first year being at Liverpool, 2nd year being last year at Leicester, and now this year, Brendan Rodgers will not suffer squad burnout. It's difficult to measure it directly with last season because obviously we've got European football to contend with this year and probably more fixtures in a quicker period of time because of COVID. But for me, as I said earlier, it's seeing these fringe players come in and just how ready and match sharp, if you like, they are to step up to the plate straight away. Obviously, we're not privy to see what happens, precisely in training, but obviously there's a good spirit there. And again, similar to the season when we won the league, that's what any success has to be built on. Let's not forget that some of the fringe players are actually title winners from that season. So what, you got Fuchs, Morgan, obviously Schmeichel's not a fringe player, but then there's Albrighton, who's in and out of the team this year. These are all big characters. This is probably a couple of theirs last season before maybe they go back into coaching roles with Fuchs and Morgan in particular. So the younger lads have got massive role models to look up to. And if we start playing well under Rodgers in what looks to be a preferred back 5 or 3 centre-backs, if you like, then there's no reason in this unpredictable season that we can't repeat what we did before. And that would be majorly down to squad rotation, which it sort of wasn't under Ranieri. So if we do have a good season this year, it'll be done through 2 different styles.
Yeah, and I mean, having the sort of personnel that can come in and play in these different manners is obviously really important. But I mean, there's a few players that we all said, or at least thought, were probably on their way out. I mean, I don't think any of us expected Mendy to be here. I think a few of us even alluded to the likes of Albrighton, probably going to be moved on. I mean, they're both playing, at a level above where they were last year. I mean, Ed, is that something that you credit Rodgers with? I mean, do you think that he deserves a praise for sort of elevating these players and getting them back playing their best?
Well, obviously you got to motivate them, don't get me wrong, but I also think we've got to be honest, they wouldn't even be in with a shout if we had our first team players. A lot of them wouldn't even, like Albrighton, one would suspect he wouldn't even be in the match day squad, but he is in the squad because we are in this injury crisis, so we do have to think about these things. Yeah, it maybe they're aware of the fact they're down the pecking order, and for many of them, this might be their one shot at getting regular first team football. And if they don't impress now, it could be like we were suggesting earlier in the year with some players, their last shot and they'll be leaving. So, you know what? Maybe they are down the pecking order, but they've certainly stepped up, and that gives a little bit more confidence in the squad. Because I know in previous conversations we've all had concerns about strength in depth, but they're certainly stepping up to the plate as of yet this season.
I mean, so we've sort of danced around the question a little bit, and Ed, you've alluded to it a couple of times there. We did go out for questions, as we always do on Twitter, and several people have essentially asked different variations of the same thing. What is Leicester's first choice 11 at this point? With, like you said, when these players come back from injury, and the fringe players that have been playing so well, I mean, in particular, Mendy and the likes of James Justin, how are we going to fit all these players into the team? So, I mean, you might agree, you might disagree, but can you please, I mean, Chris, you go first. Can you tell me what shape you would play? Firstly, would you stick with the three at the back that he's been favouring, or would you play four at the back, or how would you set up?
Well, on the notepad right in front of me, my trusted notepad, I have actually lined up with 5 at the back, which I think is probably the most common suggestion. Just looking at certain threads on social media and on the internet today. So, obviously, with the 3 centre backs, I would have gone for Fofana, Evans, and Soyuncu. And then you've obviously got Ricardo and Castagna at fullback. But like you've said already, that's for me already incredibly harsh on Justin, who's, you know, he's been one of the star performers this year, and purely in terms of consistency. Like, if you got players like him who are willing to put an 8 out of 10 in every week, then, you know, you're going to be gutted to drop him, aren't you? But then the big debate, which we've had in a couple of podcasts, as you probably have heard now, Jamie, is Ndidi or Mendy. For me, I do stand by the fact that I don't think Mendy is going to get dropped for the opening of when Ndidi is back. Ndidi will, for me, definitely feature from the bench and get introduced that way. But for like my ultimate 11, Ndidi does keep Mendy out of the picture. So I've gone for Ndidi and Tielemans in in the middle of the pitch, if you like. And then I've gone quite narrow in front of that, which I don't think we are going to see. But this is what I'd like to see, is then Maddison, Barnes and Vardy sort of... Maddison's obviously floating, but then Barnes basically right in behind Vardy. So our wide options are purely coming from wing-back, really, which I think would provide the balance, but ultimately leave us quite exposed in the middle of the park. So yeah, that's it for me. Maybe what I've done there is try and cram in like what I regard our 11 best players into a system. But as I said to you guys off air, is I would be heavily surprised if we ever see this sort of dream 11 play starting a match, because I don't think the best 11 players provide the best balance for us on the pitch, really, especially not defensively.
Ed, is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, I'd literally agree with Chris. I'm so sorry, Jamie, because I know you got super giddy at the prospect of us arguing.
I did.
Yeah, I would say, well played, lads. Thanks for getting us top of the league in both competitions we're in, and then drop everyone. And yeah, Schmeichel, then all the best back, 5 at the back, 3 at the back, whatever you want to say. The 2 wing backs, Pereira, Castagna, and then Evans, Soyuncu, and Fofana. Then you'd have like sort of Ndidi just in front of them, with Tielemans and Maddison kind of just in front of Ndidi, and then Barnes supporting Vardy up front. It's just the best team. It's as simple as that. Would be interesting, like what Chris touched on. Is that the best system? Are we ever going to see that? But I think it's quite clear at the moment that they are like the best 11 players in the squad. What do you think, Jamie? Offer some disagreement. Be a bit saucy.
Yeah. You know me, always very aggressive. No, I think that one player who's not being mentioned as often as he possibly should be is Dennis Pratt in all this, because I think that role he plays is sort of he's not quite a winger, but he plays on the right side, doesn't he? And the sort of partnership he had with Castagna, obviously they're international teammates, and latterly he's been playing with Albrighton and Justin. But I think the work that he does is really quite underrated. I think he might have almost taken on the mantle of Mark Albrighton of being Leicester's most underrated player, and I think that's potentially harsh on him. But you're right. I mean, is he good enough to keep out the likes of James Maddison and Harvey Barnes? Probably not. But
this is what I mean, though. This is what I mean. Like, all these replies are like this, like, you know, exhibition-esque sort of squad who's like all free-flowing football. But practically speaking, I think we are literally more likely to see Ndidi and Mendy start in the same match than we are to see this plethora of attacking talent in Tielemans, Maddison, Barnes, Vardy, Pereira, and Castagna. Do you know what I mean? To me, that just seems like something I'd try on Football Manager and be sacked by November.
You could do that with any formation, Chris.
Well, exactly. I'm just going to show that. Just do the opposite of whatever I'd suggest, because even looking at it on the paper in front of me, we'd get so overrun in midfield. Like, I don't know. That's why, for me, like, in certain proper tough games, is Ndidi and Mendy a bad shout? Because I said it in last week's podcast, and that's not even a dig at you, Jamie. I'll say it again purely because I think it is true that they aren't the same sort of defensive midfielder. Mendy will give you so much more energy than Ndidi does. Ndidi's got that sort of athletic, sort of prolonged reach. He can really win the ball back from positions he has no right to. But Mendy, it's almost the stuff that he does off the ball. I don't like. It's a bit weird to regard him as like a sheepdog sort of player, but if you know what I mean, like, he'll literally herd the players and move the game from side to side. I know it's a weird thing to say. But I just regard them two as a bit of a balance. Yes, Mendy will never be regarded as a sheepdog again, but I like it. It's the picture I'm portraying in my head. He keeps the team moving left to right without even having the ball to his feet, whereas indeed he wins the ball back and starts and moves the other way.
I mean, we've been so complimentary of Papi Mendy on here recently, and I can't help but feel we've just undone all that good work by calling him a sheepdog. I feel it sort of plays down what he's wrong. But I know I get your point. But I mean, interestingly though, one of the players who's being credited with being key to our form is Youri Tielemans. I mean, he was criticised last year for appearing to be unfit, not being sharp, but he's played every minute of every Premier League game, along with two others. Obviously, Kasper Schmeichel has obviously played every minute, and the other one is James Justin, who's played every minute in almost every position on the pitch. So, I mean, Tielemans is probably one of those you'd say was undroppable, isn't he, at the minute with the way he's playing?
I think for me, he's undroppable because no one matches his range of passes for me. The closest player who you've rated is Pratt, but in that sense, maybe do we really need two sort of players who can unlock a game like that? Obviously, a lot of people will be thinking Maddison as well, but I honestly want to see Maddison in more of an advanced role, having someone like Tielemans or Pratt as a deep line playmaker, and Maddison playing more of like a Jack Grealish. But again, can we afford to have sort of a luxury player like that with a bit less discipline in the game? For me, I'll be honest, I still think Grealish is the better player in terms of having that freedom, but it just goes to show that potentially if you do give a player that sort of responsibility, it gives them the chance to really showcase their talents. But I just think that having that player who plays in between the lines is potentially the one last thing that we're missing. Because too often we've seen, Maddison pushed out wide and he just doesn't seem comfortable there. I'd like to see him have a bit more freedom and bridging that gap whilst having a player, like almost like a quarterback, like player who can spray the ball out as well, Tielemans wise.
I mean, he was obviously injured a lot last year. He's been injured again this season. And Rodgers has been quite clever in trying to get minutes in his legs and bring him back to fitness. Ed, do you think that we're starting to see James Maddison's best football now? I mean, I thought he was excellent at times in the last two games, but what have you made of him? Do you think we're starting to see the best of him again?
Yeah, he's certainly better now than he was when he was injured, so good point.
You know what I mean.
Well, he's improving, players who get a knock for a while and have to wait their turn to get in, especially when they're on form. But I guess at the end of the day, he's just one of those players that are so important to the way we play that he adds that extra creativity. He can create something easily. He can score goals. He's just a classy player, and we've not actually had many of those central attacking mid kind of players over recent times anyway, and he's just that little bit of quality and creativity that we need, and I think we were definitely missing him when he wasn't here. So I was always saying on the podcast how we have little in midfield when we were like not got him involved. So now he's back, it's definitely a little bit more flair I think he brings.
Quite jazzy, isn't it? But
not too jazzy.
Yeah. Alluding to the fact of the England squad, right? And honest answers here. Who do you actually think is a sort of better number 10 then, if you like? If you had to pick one in a team, Jack Grealish or James Maddison?
Grealish.
I think it's Grealish. And again, it's no disrespect to say that you're a worse player than Jack Grealish isn't an insult.
What about Foden? What about Mason Mount? There's a lot of players in that position.
Well, I think Foden is, he's a special talent. Mount for me I don't think he comes in. He's a different sort of player for me. But yeah, but in terms, everyone always compares Grealish. Well, not compares, but says which one's getting the team, Grealish or Maddison. So Jamie, who would you go for?
I think Grealish is ahead on form at the moment, but I think that's because he's had the run of games. He's not been out injured, and he's had to single-handedly drag Aston Villa back in, keep them up in the Premier League. And then he started well this year, and I think it's purely because he's playing more games. I don't. So he's ahead at the minute. I think England's challenge is getting all these players into the same team and getting them playing again. Like the English, sort of media and fans just seem desperate to pit good players against each other, don't they? I mean, we've seen it over the years with Lampard and Gerrard and Scholes, for example. Instead of just saying, "Oh, isn't this great? How are we going to make it work?" They're like, "Well, which one's better?" No, it's not this one. And just sort of drag down the other one, which I think is a bit strange. But it's probably Grealish at the minute, isn't it? Being honest. But
what about Ward-Prowse, Jamie?
Mate, I've finally been vindicated. He's been brilliant recently. Get him in City. We'll make it work.
He is your first signing on FM21, isn't he? I think he was your first signing on FM20.
That's all he needed. Him on free kicks and corners. That's like 8 goals a year. Easy.
Yeah, because Maddison's obviously awful at that.
Well, one's left-footed, one's right-footed. This is the levels that we're talking about.
To be fair, you can't compare. What is it? Ward-Prowse has already beaten Letiz's record from set pieces at Saints, and he obviously spent his whole career there. But the thing what's he scored? It's like 9 direct free kicks in last couple of seasons or something. It seems like a strange number because when you compare that to someone like Ronaldo, who literally can't hit the target from a free kick 80% of the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but he does that funny run up, so everyone assumes he's wicked.
Well, that's the thing, but yeah, obviously Ward-Prowse doesn't necessarily come into this. I don't know, how would you put Ward-Prowse? How would you get Ward-Prowse into Leicester team then?
I wouldn't.
I mean, realistically, I don't think he does at the minute. As much as I'd love to have this solution, this straight up to, I don't know. I don't think he does at the minute, does he? We're lucky that we're very well stocked in the midfield, so I don't think he does. Despite my exploits, it is heartbreaking to admit. Actually, that's made me quite sad. So, I mean, listen. One of the things you have touched upon is the England squad. Both Barnes and Maddison obviously failing to make Gareth Southgate's squad for the upcoming games. Is that necessarily a bad thing?
No, I don't really know why either of them should be nailed on at the minute anyway. Harvey Barnes has been great this season, but England have a wide range of wing options. I don't know, I've got the list in front of me. Sterling, Sancho, Rashford, Grealish. Foden can play out wide. James Ward-Prowse, who's world class, can play out there. So, there's no nailed on. Even if he is on form, he didn't even start for Leicester in the last game, although that was maybe, I don't know if it came out, maybe it was rotation, maybe it was fitness or illness, I don't know. But that was a bit of a surprise pick. But yeah, and same with Maddison, he's just come back from a knock. So if anything, I'd say it's a good thing. Keep him fresh. Stay at training with Vardy, get all the England boys, three best attackers, get them in training, working together, get that synergy on tap, and I think it's a good thing.
I think that's the thing. I think when I first seen it, I was like, my initial reaction was that that's a relief because ultimately you want to be, saving your legs. We're going into traditionally, obviously, the most busiest part of the season, the Christmas period, if you like, in just over a month. So for me, it wasn't a bad thing because obviously sometimes, as in Barnes's case, you get called up to a squad and you don't actually get any game time. So whereas realistically, if you stay, domestic at Leicester, then you're going to have a few days off and just, recuperate. So for me, it's not a bad thing. Obviously, professionally, like we've had this debate before, like how much does an international call-up still mean to the players? Are they more money-driven now? Do they honestly, like deep down, just think, I don't really care that much for playing for my country? I know that sounds cynical and almost horrible and almost unthought of in like the 80s or the 90s when caps meant so much to players, but now is it a different game? And are these players sort of, especially if you are a fringe player, going to be relieved, or does it still exist? I'm asking these questions as devil's advocate. Like, do these players honestly like look forward to going and playing or just training with the England squad, or is that just a bit more of a myth now? As because Vardy's a bit of a different case, but he said himself he doesn't want to be getting called up. Obviously, he alluded to his age, saying no, he's getting on a bit, but like ultimately, he was saying like I don't really want to be a fringe player. It's sort of a waste of my time. I've got a young family. I'd rather spend it with them. So, how important is playing for your country, especially in these sorts of nothing tournaments, really?
Ed, do you want to take that one?
I'm willing to give it to you, Jamie. You
Well,
contribute.
No, yeah, for once he had. I think you're right in that it's probably something that's easy to think, isn't it? That's why I found Connor Cody's interview after the last England game so refreshing, because he was absolutely buzzing, wasn't he? Like, I don't know if you saw it, but obviously he scored in the game and he was over the bloody moon, and you could tell what it meant to him to be playing for his country and putting on an England shirt. And ultimately, you've got to hope that players want to be, even if it's from a vanity point of view, but they want to be seen to be the best in the country, and they want to. And you'd hope that this little rivalry that's been built between Maddison and Grealish, that they want to be seen to coming out on top, if that makes sense.
I
But
get that, but at the same time, it's almost like to be the best, you've got to be the best in the Premier League. Like you say, people. There's always criticism surrounding the England squad, isn't there? There's always these comparisons and stuff. Whereas the Premier League's like the holy grail. Like if you're, the best at the Premier League, you've got a global audience. People want your name on the back of their shirt. It's millions, if not billions, of people watching you. Like, how many people are going to be watching England versus or Belgium versus England, or potentially, England's match against Iceland might actually get forfeited in these strange times. Like, do you know what I mean? Players, just wages and everything, and I don't know. For me, it's hard to comment. Don't get me wrong. You'd love to represent your country, but I don't know whether the importance of it is that much, or whether these players would secretly be sort of relieved that they haven't got called up in this instance.
no, I mean, there's no doubt that it's more of a money-driven industry than it used to be. That goes without saying. I don't know whether it's almost because there are so many games, with the amount of friendlies that we have as well, and with the Nations League, whether it sort of almost cheapens the international matches because there are so many. When you're playing, you've had 2 international breaks already, nearly. I mean, we're only 8 games into the season. It just seems like they're a bit too regular, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you have hit the nail on the head there. Actually, thinking about it, because like they've obviously shoved the Nations League in there, trying to make friendlies more important. But if you think about it, if you just kept it to a tournament every 2 years, yeah, I'd see something prestigious as potentially becoming a World Cup winner, or winning the what's it called?
It's called the Euros, mate.
The Euros, that's the one. We're winning, that would be great, wouldn't it? So, but I think for players like Harry Kane, obviously they've got goals in mind that are personal goals, such as becoming England's all-time top goal scorer or something like that. But for me, I don't know. I don't know. I'm obviously siding with the fact that if you're a fringe player for England, sometimes it might be a relief that you're not actually getting a call up.
I think that as someone who actually loves England matches,
I don't know if that's sarcastic or not.
oh no, I do. I'm very passionate about England. as a place as well as a football team. However, I I do feel that not just for me, but for everyone really, and you can't really blame the players for thinking this as well. You know, when it's a tournament, yeah, it is mega playing for England. It's so important. You're so invested, both as a fan and a player, I imagine, and you just love it. The whole country stops. But for these friendlies, it literally doesn't matter. And I think part of it's to do with the frequency, like you say. Part of it, I think, is to do because it's in the middle of the Premier League season. So it's like they've got a load of other stuff to be thinking about anyway. They had stuff on their mind before they got there, and they'll have stuff after it. So it doesn't really matter what happens. It's not important. It's a friendly match. Whereas when it's a tournament and all your focus is on this one thing, then I think it really matters then, because that's like the be all and end all. If you get a winner against Iceland, it's like no one gives a shit. And I think Connor Cody, like you say, was a fresh breath of fresh air. But I think that's more so with the fact he's always been a bit of a. He's not been a fashionable player, shall we say? He's not been seeing he's going to be an England international from when he's young. I imagine he's probably not gone through the youth system. And I imagine, I'm making a lot of assumptions here, he was probably very surprised when he even got a call up. So for these players who sort of it wasn't expected, I imagine that's what Vardy was like as well for the first few games anyway. It's more important to them because they're not used to it. They're not acclimatized to it. They don't expect it. So it's more of a meaningful venture rather than someone, I don't know, let me look at the list, who probably doesn't care.
I mean, Chris, obviously, feel free to cut this out. But Connor Cody played for the England under 16s, under 17s, under 18s, under 19s, and under 20s. Amazing. But I know, I do know.
Just for the record, it's not getting cut out.
didn't play for the under 21s though, which let's be honest is the only one that actually matters.
And it does. And he last played for the England, obviously under 20s, and that was a full 7 years ago. So you're right. He has been out in the cold and probably didn't expect to get called up. You're right. Do carry on.
I guess what I'm saying. This is his third season as a Premier League player in his career where he's played more than one match. So it's probably more meaningful for him.
To be fair, looking at the centre-back options, he's got a shout at being he's in contention because you certainly play him over someone like Harry Maguire right now.
Well, I mean, Harry Maguire, Joe Gomez, they're not exactly having stellar seasons so far.
Can I just pull you up? Because I heard Ed going, ooh, to Harry Maguire. So please, justify why Harry Maguire deserves to start for England.
Well, he's the best centre-back in the England squad.
Like,
whether he's currently been on form since his antics in the summer is very much, I don't even know if it's up for debate. He's not been. He's just the best centre-back. He's more experienced than many of the other options. Look at the alternatives. You'll look at Joe Gomez, not experienced, but maybe he's one for the future. Keane, no.
His lack of pace in regards to someone like Joe Gomez.
Well, you need more than one centre back. If you're suggesting Maguire on his own, then
I'm using him as an example. Maybe let's look at their goal they conceded against Başakşehir or whatever they want to be called. No disrespect to the Turkish team, of course, but you've got, where's the leader on the pitch then? If you were talking about, I presume you're going to say he's a good leader. So how does a team concede a goal like that in regards to literally not leaving anyone back from going to...
I've not watched the game between Manchester United and Turkish side.
The clip was all over social media. They've gone to attack a corner, but they've left no one back.
All out attack style.
But well, yes. So for me, it's stuff like that he's done this season. In regards to, he's not really. You can't turn around to me and say no, but he's been good at this or he's been good at that. He's literally just had a really shit season. So if you can't pick a player on form, what else are you really you picking him in hope that he's just going to play well for England?
I think he's the best player in that position. So we're certainly getting sidetracked here. But like in attacking positions, for example, say someone like Sterling's nailed, but the other wingers in the squad have probably got more goals than assists than him this season. Like I just think Harry Maguire for England is one of those players where he starts. Given the alternatives. Now, if it was like Leicester, for example, and we had all of our full defenders back, and I don't know, Fofana was out of form or whatever, you'd think about, right, we can bring another player in. But here, Maguire starts for England. But this is definitely sidetracked from our Leicester City debate.
No. I like putting you under pressure because I still don't think you've answered the question why he deserves.
But he's the best player.
Just saying he's the best player, but I'm asking what does he possess in his game that makes him the best player? Like skill set, like stats. Why is he good? Why do you feel comfortable having him in the team over someone like, I don't know, Joe Gomez?
Why am I more? I'm not saying over Joe Gomez. I'd probably start those two at centre back if I was to have a 4-man defence. The other options would be Keane. I think it's most people would argue.
Okay, what about like Tyrone Mings or Connor Cody then?
I don't think they are players who have got the ability, at least in the game against Belgium. Maybe you'd give them the shot against Iceland, against a team that is a lesser team with perhaps less tactical nous than one of the big boys, where you want to play your top players who have played against these big time opposition in international tournaments. You'd give them a run out, especially if Maguire's CAC. I don't know what the order of games is, but
Belgium, we've got, is there a friendly on Thursday against like Republic of Ireland or something, which literally no one cares about? But obviously everyone's looking at Belgium away. But unlike you, I don't particularly have a passion for England football. But what I'm getting at is, especially when you're up against someone like Lukaku, albeit he is coming back from a minor injury at the moment, but you've got a lot of pace in that Belgium team, which England were sort of found out at even in the home game. Don't actually remember what the result was. I think, did England win that match in the end? Well, either way, it doesn't matter. All I'm saying is that can you afford to be almost carrying a passenger in Harry Maguire? But ultimately, this is a Leicester City podcast. But I'm going to make a bold prediction. I don't think he'll start against Belgium.
Well, there you go then. That is a bold prediction. We'll see. We'll see if your predictions are as good as mine. I predict it will.
And I'm going to stay firmly on the fence. Seems the safest place to be. But it was good getting, you two having a little argument again. It's like old times, isn't it?
Random point. Why is Ainsley Maitland-Niles in the England squad?
Because he plays for Arsenal next.
Yeah, but the thing is, he doesn't play for Arsenal.
It is, but that's the point. Just on virtue of being an Arsenal squad member, you somehow elevated above the likes of, then Barnes and Maddison aren't in it.
What about Justin? They play the same position, kind of.
Yeah, Justin's still getting the youth. I mean, in the under 20s or 21.
Is he actually in the 21s?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, he could do with the rest as well. He's played every minute.
Harry Winks is another questionable choice, but I just feel like you got to plug the squad out of players. Everyone raves about like Declan Rice and Harry Winks to an extent, but I mean, again, they're the areas that England are. I don't know, it's a bit light. But Jamie, you strike me as a guy who thinks Rice is a world beater already.
No. Just no. I think he's a good player, and I think he does a lot of the dirty side of the game really, really well. I don't think he's the world beater he's made out to be yet. He's definitely got the potential, but he's another one of those players that, because he's English and he's young, he's elevated way beyond where he's at the moment. I think there's a reason he didn't move in the summer. Put it that way.
Because no one bid for him.
That's very cool.
Well, that's the thing. If you're not, that's the thing. Obviously, other teams are agreeing with my very detailed assumption there. Yeah. Anyway,
Leicester City.
Yeah. So, I mean, the only other question that we had to put in was a subject to transfer business. Is that, do you think that a lot of the other big teams now are going to be absolutely screaming at their scouts because no one made a bid for one Wesley Fofana? Do you think that we've stolen a march on the big clubs with him?
Well, West Ham was sniffing. I think they offered about 10 quid for him. So
I said big clubs.
Yeah, but the West Ham ironically would tell you that they've got this grand old stadium, well, grand new stadium.
It's definitely not old.
Yeah,
but no, I don't know. People are already comparing him to like Van Dijk and stuff, which is a bit premature. Not sure how many people were watching.
He's not injured for a start.
Well, he apparently is carrying a.
Well, yeah. Breaking news.
There you go. So, apparently he's carrying a little knee injury, which sounds cute if anything. It's like a little graze. No, look, ultimately, yes. But this is what I mean. Again, I'm always a negative one, but we have signed a lot of shit as well, to be fair. So, if you chuck enough at the wall, some of it will stick. And Fofana's obviously come out to be a good signing so far, but does that mean we should I guess it's the same for every football team, but we seem to strike gold a lot more often than other teams. But we do also maybe strike rotten luck in the signings that a lot of people forget about as well.
Like beige.
What?
Like you say, we strike gold is a good thing.
Oh, right, yeah.
I'm just trying to think of a dual colour that we could strike to signify the opposite.
Someone who will forever stand in my mind is, was it like Hernandez?
Luis Hernandez,
Yeah.
who got in the La Liga team of the season.
What's he doing this year?
I don't know.
I couldn't even tell you where he's playing.
He must be in the second tier of Spanish football now, surely.
I'll tell you where he is. Oh no, that's not even him. He's Mexico.
He
plays for Maccabi Tel Aviv.
He's in
there you go.
Israel.
Fantastic.
I mean, because since he's been playing at Leicester, I think he's been not really been on the losing side. We've won those 6 in a row since Saint Etienne sold him. I'm not even certain if they've managed to pick up a win since they got rid of him. In fact, I don't think they have. Definitely not in the league. They've lost their last 6 in a row. That might be coincidence, but he's definitely made a good start, hasn't he, Ed? I think.
I'm willing to make a curveball comment.
Oh God!
Here we go. I don't think many teams, other than those around us, will be bothered by this, and I'll tell you why. I think that there's a lot of very good players who sort of just get signed up to big clubs and never do anything, and they never progress because they're not given the opportunity to play regularly. And a club like Leicester is attractive. Yes, you don't want to be seen as a stepping stone, but that's what we're going to be at the minute, let's be honest, because you're going to get these opportunities. And I think the big clubs have that much money that they actually would probably rather see somebody prove their worth for a couple of seasons and get them when they're proven and quality and have already developed, that's someone they can count on, rather than chucking 20-30 million on a possibility that may only play 10 games a season. Like, you see, who was Fofana's teammate at Saint Etienne?
This is what I'm saying.
He's not even in Arsenal's squad. He can't play this season. Arsenal just signed Saliba, and he's not in their squad. For £30 million. It was 27 million according to what I'm seeing in front of me. And he can't play.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have hit the nail on the head. So what my point was going to be is that who's to say that this Saliba guy, if he came to Leicester, maybe their quality and their skill set right now is very similar. I don't know enough about him, but for me, it's just the way it's that confidence you get in these young players. It's his confidence, how he's commanding at the back. He's not scared to take a man on, to bring the ball out. He just seems like a really silky operator. So in that extent, yeah, I guess you can see the sort of similarities with a younger Van Dijk. But yeah, so far so good. We just got to make sure that he's got a good agent as well. Obviously, we don't want to start seeing a troublemaker whereby he's getting touted and linked to bigger clubs in inverted commas come even January. You've seen stranger things happen. So hopefully he stays grounded and he sees it as the best move for his own career. At least in the midterm.
Yeah. I mean, Ed, are you essentially saying that in a way we are something of a feeder club to like Man City?
Yeah. Like, you got to accept it. Like, it's you can get to a point where you start getting that good, that consistent. You can start holding on to players. I know Spurs, I think we're trying to follow their sort of trajectory, even though I would say we're probably better than them now, at least on form. But they were never the big boys. But then I remember when they had those amazing players like Bale and Modric, and they had that defence with Walker, and I know Rose stayed and ended up being rubbish, but those two, and then the two Belgian centre-backs, and they ended up getting that good, that consistently, that actually, yeah, they had to sell a couple for mega fees, but they could start keeping hold of these big players and attracting big players as well. And I think we're in that. It's a process. It's going to take time for us to get there, but we are now at a point where we've stepped up. We're not sort of like a team. We're definitely not in any relegation battle. We're not really a mid-table team anymore. We're trying to get into that top six, and it's going to take time. And it may be for a few years that we're going to get one player picked off every year, but we invest that money right, then we can start making that gap up, and we can cement ourselves there. And eventually, the end goal would be that we don't stop that we stop losing these players.
It's an interesting one because it can go one of two ways, can't it? It can go the Spurs way, which I'm going to criticise in a second, or it can go the Southampton way because 6, 7, 8 years ago, Southampton, you could say, they were famously a feeder club for Liverpool, and they churned out a lot of good players. But ultimately, obviously now they're having a good season, but they quickly faded to become like a mid-table Premier League side, one that you don't really think about. They're a bit of a meh team. Whereas Spurs, in reality, how much is separating us and Spurs in terms of, certainly silverware? We've won more than them recently, whether or not that counts for a lot. Obviously, we've had the trophy debate in the past. Ed's going to say they've qualified for more Champions League. So if that is the case, is all that separates us and Spurs is them being a London team, them having a bigger, newer ground, and also a couple more recent Champions League qualification? Because in reality, what are the other differences? Why are Spurs regarded as such a bigger club than Leicester City then?
Well, no, you've just said other than the fact they've done better recently and they're in a more attractive place.
Well, yeah, but
why does that make better than? Why is the fact they've done better than us recently?
No, I think you've misinterpreted what I said. Why have they done better than us? Does qualifying for the Champions League constitute something in their trophy cabinet? Does it constitute success, or does it constitute financial reward? Because I've said this before. What I'm saying, and I think what you've misunderstood, is that I don't think there is a reason for us not to be in the same bracket as Tottenham.
I do. I think we've finished above them twice in like 20 years. So they are
finished. You could finish. So a team could finish 6th, and we could finish 7th consecutively for 20 years. But if it's Wolves, you regard them in the same bracket as us.
I don't know. We've won the Premier League the same.
In this very podcast, you've regarded Wolves as our competitor. We've been in the Premier League.
Okay, we've won the Premier League as many times in like the last 25 years or whatever it is as Blackburn. They've probably finished a direct competitor times as well.
City and Spurs.
I think because Wolves we've finished closer to Wolves than we have for Spurs for the last few seasons. And Wolves have a similar trajectory to us in terms of not historically, at least being in the last 20 years or so, a European and top half of the Premier League regular, but they're an up-and-coming side
Wolves
with
have only
high
been in the Premier League
aspirations.
for about 3 seasons, most
And
recently.
we've probably been in for about 5. It's not much more. Didn't they go up the year after we won the league, or was it the year after?
I think Wolves came into Premier League 3 seasons after we did.
I just think right now, and that this shows progression, I think, the teams that are our biggest rivals are probably Everton and Wolves on paper.
I disagree with that.
Obviously. No, that I think if everyone plays
Why on earth?
as expected throughout the season, we'd be in and around them. Now, I think we can play better and progress. I also think some of the big boys can play worse and regress, and therefore it wouldn't be a shock if we were in and around the top 4. But I think if everyone stayed at their level, we would be in maybe around the 6th, 7th position.
I don't know. I just think that in the space of an hour, you've said that Wolves. I mean, you've obviously tried to go on and justify it, but what my point being is that other than you actually use the fact that Spurs were in London, that makes them a bigger club than us, which for me is that is a ridiculous argument.
I think. Do you want me to bullet point a few points why I think they're a bigger club, or seen as more attractive, or whatever? I'll happily do that, and then you can muse on your thoughts. I think they're bigger because we've finished above them like twice in my lifetime. I think they're bigger because they're in, well, for example, they've not won anything, but they were in the Champions League final last year. I think they can attract big name players like Gareth Bale, even though I know he's already got an affinity with him. But players like Bale is a superstar, certainly on the way down, but he still is. The fact they've been able to hold on to someone like Kane for so long in his peak, I think, is a sign that they're a big club. They've attracted Mourinho. I don't think we could do that. I think their income.
This was Mourinho's last big job, and it's at Spurs.
Yeah, I think their income is every year is
don't
always
go down the income route again.
Well, I've not mentioned it. I think their income's higher than ours, and always has been. I think London for a footballer, a young man, is more attractive proposition than Leicester. I think it's more not just the place, but just the club. It's seen, I'd say, probably abroad as more of a good place to go to in terms of status, not necessarily best for their progression, but it's seen as a bigger thing. Off the top of my head, that's what I don't think that means they will come ahead of us this year, and I don't think that means they'd beat us. But I think that is why they would be seen as a bigger club than Leicester.
Again, it's a subjective argument, and this isn't because I've got my Leicester tinted glasses on. I could have the same argument for why Wolves, not Wolves actually, because I obviously use them in a negative light, but it's sort of Everton and Spurs. Again, what separates them really? Because Liverpool's a big cosmopolitan city. And all the points you've just mentioned, they've attracted Carlo Ancelotti, who. Again, surely he's won more than Mourinho in his career. I mean, that's just off the top of my head. Neither of those teams have won any silverware. So again, it does depend on the metrics you want to go down. But for me, if we're measuring success on just financial size of a club primarily, then I guess it is a sad reflection of the times, because in recent history, Man City and Liverpool, ultimately the only teams that have taken any sort of silverware home. So I guess beyond that, it's maybe finances is a way of measuring the stature of a club. But I think traditionally speaking, you'd always measure that on what a team's won, surely.
Well, I'd say if we continue our trajectory, I'd be willing to have this conversation with you in 2 to 3 years' time, and I may come out with a different result. But right now, I'm pretty confident in saying.
Here's one for you then.
Club size.
How long do Man United have to remain shit for? And given this has been going on for 8 years already, for them to they're obviously big, like historically a huge club, financially just remarkably known on the global planet for being Man United. But like, seriously, how long will they just forever be like a big club?
I think with them, they got good at the right time when football. Because as far as I'm aware, and I'm not a historian, they've not always been at the absolute peak. You hear of people saying Liverpool went through spells, or Everton or whoever were at the top, but Man U just went off on one when the Premier League grew massively and went global, and their financial situation and income and fan base and everything. I think they can be huge and be shit for a very long time. And I'm willing to say now, I know I've got pelters the last few seasons for sticking up for them. I think they are in trouble this season, but I'd still think they are going to be a draw for just about any player in world football.
I mean, cutting some credit to Man U, which you disrespected massively. They were big in sort of the 60s, 70s, and then they did go off into a bit of slump, and then obviously rejuvenated with the rise of the Premier League, rightfully so. But well, yeah, I mean that's a totally different debate. But for me, teams like Leicester, Tottenham, Everton, them three, I'd literally looking at the table, them three for me, in terms of success, they have to be in the same bracket. Obviously, though, yeah, financially. But then, even then, Spurs are like financially speaking, they are in huge debt right now. So Leicester would be well, I don't know, maybe, well, yeah, a richer club than Spurs.
If you want me to be honest, I think the team that Leicester will overtake for being more attractive, the first of the big boys at current trajectory, will be Arsenal. Because they are not very good. And I don't see anything positive in their dressing room or just anything to do with their club at the minute.
I'd rather be Arsenal than Man U.
What do you think about that, Jamie?
Better manager.
Oh, well,
chip in.
No. Well, I mean, just on the last point only, I think if I had to choose one of the two, I'd rather be United than Arsenal, purely because they have this habit of just throwing money at the problem, which, like Chris said, how long can they keep doing that? I hate the fact that they keep signing these players and it's like, oh, these are the saviours. We've signed Wan-Bissaka for 50 million, 8 million Harry Maguire. That's it, our defence is solved. Oh, but we're not creative enough. We've signed Bruno Fernandes. Oh, but now we've not got X, Y, and Z. It's like everyone else's fault that they're shit because they don't have enough players. They're like, oh, well, it's not Solskjaer's fault. He's not got the tools to behave. They've spent more money than almost everyone else.
Here's a fun game. So to judge who is at least considerably bigger than Leicester, yeah. Think of any of our players in our squad who could be an attractive proposition. Like, do you think they would turn down the chance to go to Man City, for example?
I think I could put.
So yeah, go through them all and keep going to the point where you think they might be in two minds, and that's probably the point where you think we're at. And I don't think any of them would be in two minds about going to Man U at the minute. I think they'd go, but I don't think they'd be 100% set on going to Arsenal.
Or Everton, for example.
Yeah, I don't think they'd go to Everton. I don't think they'd go to anyone probably outside of Liverpool, Man City, Man U, Chelsea.
Yeah, well,
which is a huge statement, really, on where we are now, right?
Yeah, that's massive. Think about saying that like 5 years ago. Think about that saying that like 2 years ago. Like, they'd jump at the chance, but
apart from one player, obviously, who you remain loyal throughout.
Wes Morgan, but
yeah.
But like that does show where we are, and like, you know, we can fall away. We did last season; it could happen again. But right now, we're at least battling it out with clubs on paper that are way above our size. And a few more years of that, I think we could be considered in the same breath as them. Just we'd need that couple more years to.
I mean, say hypothetically, we win the Premier League this year. Why? How can you seriously look at me and go, Spurs are still a bigger club?
Wow.
We won two Premier Leagues in modern times. surely that blows Spurs
That's
coming
how,
in the
yeah.
top four.
If we win the Premier League, I will take that statement back. Yeah.
Okay, so you've
Is
set
that
that
fair?
pretty high, but that's fine.
That's where the line is drawn. I think what you can. I mean, it's a great debate. I think the whole what constitutes a big club is something that really does split fans, though, doesn't it? I mean, because Chris, you're right. How long can you dine out on the history of being good? I mean, for example, I think certain like Ipswich fans think they're still a massive club because they were good in like the 40s, whenever it was.
You could have picked a couple of more local sides. I could think of a few that think they're bigger than Leicester, who haven't done much in a while.
Yeah.
Currently battling it out at the bottom of the Championship.
Hopefully they'll fall through that trapdoor soon. But I think you're right in that. I mean, at least we can agree that I know it's still very early on. We're only 8 games in, but the top 10 or 9 or so of the Premier League this season is hugely refreshing, isn't it? It is great to see the likes of Southampton and Everton and Palace doing well. You know, Man United currently closer to West Brom in 18th than they are to us. It probably won't stay that way for the whole season, but it has been a good start, hasn't it? But I mean,
obviously, we've spoken about one last thing about Harry Maguire. Man United have conceded 14 goals, which, to be fair, you can't really say a lot because Liverpool have conceded 16. But my point being, to be fair, I guess
Most of that was in one match, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So obviously, there's a bit of an anomaly there, but it goes to show, like you say, Jamie, that they thought they fixed their defensive woes. But it is weird because you still got players like Wan-Bissaka who is still probably the Premier League's best tackler on stats. So it's like they have signed the right players. You can't blend these up players all in. Maybe it is a case that it's just all going to snap into place. But obviously you've got players like Pogba who's been there for 3 years now or something. And he still can't find any form. So I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah, where does the problem really lie? I mean, looking at the table as well, one thing that's just jumped out at me is that completely unrelated is that Burnley have only scored 3 goals this season. That's not a happy place to be.
Actually, I've got to jump in. I mean, I did see that, and that is abysmal. They're going down this year. But Ed, okay, players linked. How about managers linked? Rodgers is definitely going to be linked with Man United when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer finally gets sacked by Christmas. Is Rodgers a person who's going to leave Leicester for Man United?
Yeah, you wouldn't even think twice about it. It's going to be Pochettino shortly, but like that is like it's the biggest gig in like British football. Like, just think if you're a manager with any ego about you, imagine picking up that team with that money and that
Liverpool.
Yeah, but think you go to Man U with all that money. Think about just being on Football Manager. You got all this amazing squad and all this money, and everyone thinks they're rubbish, and you can bring forward a new era of dominance for them.
He's doing that at Leicester City.
Yeah, and you know what? We'll thank him for it. But you know how much more kudos he'd get at
There won't
Man
be
U.
many people thanking Brendan Rodgers for bringing Leicester City forward if he jumped ship now.
I'd say I
don't think so.
Well, we got into Europe. I think
Claudio Ranieri took us into Europe. Claudio Ranieri won us the league, and the amount of disrespect on his name in that second season is appalling. People are so fickle. Brendan Rodgers is not going to be heralded as some sort of Leicester City legend if he jumps.
I don't think he'll be a legend.
Well, no,
I'm saying he will see himself if he can turn Man U around and not make them the best in the country again, but make them competitive. I think the odds of putting him down as one of the best British managers of modern times, he will be able to achieve that at Man U.
Do you not think that's a big risk, given that people like Jose Mourinho have gone and tried to do that and failed? If anything, then, like I said, now leaving him with probably one last shot at a big team, if you like, in England especially. So do you not think there's a huge risk for Rodgers to now go, look, I'm building something positive here at Leicester. I want to gamble all that and potentially fail, potentially being, he could go on to be, he could be a legend at Man United.
Could be better than Fergie.
Exactly. Well, he could. Like, Fergie would have been a similar age when he joined, so if he goes, then fair play to him. But you say bait, but in reality, what you're basically saying is that Brendan Rodgers they've rolled the red carpet out for the next manager of Man United to emulate Sir Alex Ferguson. So I'm not sure where the bait therein lies. Because you're saying the next successor at Man United could become a club legend, like Sir Alex.
No, I'm saying that if they lose their manager and they're way down the league, that will be.
So that's a measure of success to bring Man United back to competing with the top six.
I think that he could leave a legacy. Look, every player, every manager wants to be at the biggest name club with the biggest players.
He's been at Celtic.
Well, okay. There's only but you got to think from his standpoint, he can only go down from there. So maybe Man U's the next best thing. I would ask Jamie here, if Man U.
I'm going to put it out to a poll as well.
We'll come back to that at the end of this podcast and we can triangulate the results and see what's going on. Let's say in 11 games time we are midway through the season after 19 matches and Man U are in 10th place. Leicester are doing well, not as well as now, maybe third or fourth. There's like 15 points in it, and Man U sat the manager and approached Brendan Rodgers. What do you think he'd do?
If you listen to the literally hundreds of Celtic fans that sent us abuse when he joined us, they'd have you believe that he will jump ship at the very first opportunity he gets. I personally, I'm not convinced that he would. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it'd be a cut and dry decision where he'd immediately go, "No, I'm saying Leicester."
Well, let's not forget he turned Tottenham down.
I don't know. I don't know whether I'm just thinking with my blue tinted glasses on and saying but there is something to be said for building a project, and I think if Leicester can, like you said, be one of those teams that doesn't have to sell their top players, that we are probably one of the best placed clubs to break into that traditional monopoly of the top six, aren't we? Top six, top four. We're probably one of the biggest and best challengers to that. And it's whether you think he would rather. I mean, it's not like he's slumming it at Leicester. We're going to have this world-class training ground. You've got properly good players in the squad. Granted, on paper, our squad isn't as strong as United, and we haven't got that sort of global fan base, but it's not exactly we're not exactly a small club in the grand scheme of things now, and you'd like to think that would be enough, but
I'm just looking at it from his point of view and thinking it's not the easy option to stay at Leicester either, because obviously there's pressures just like there is in any job, but imagine the amount of pressure you get. You go to Man United, you get criticised when you don't win back-to-back matches. Like, it's a totally different level. You've got to think about it from a practical point of view in terms of his career. Like, he could have 20 years left in the game. He's got a lot of time to still go to a club like Man United, and just think about what he can gain at Leicester in that time.
Ed, if he went to Man United, say that scenario came true, he went to Man United, and within a year and a half, he's in the exact same position they are now, is abject, and he is sacked. Where does that leave his career? Is realistically, is he ever going to get a top job again?
Yeah, I think he could go into a job at a mid-table side. You're looking at the likes of.
Did you say the top job?
Well, it's another stepping stone, isn't it?
So basically, because I personally think that you go to Man United and you fail, your reputation takes a massive hit. I mean, you look at Mourinho; he is no longer regarded as being a world-class manager, I don't think. And that directly stems from his failure at United.
I don't know. It depends how confident they are in their abilities. Does one look at the risk, or does one look at the potential rewards? Because there are big potential reward. There's massive risks. Don't get me wrong, but there is big potential rewards there. And with that being said, similar point as the players, I don't think he'd go to Arsenal if they wanted him. I don't think they'd go to Spurs, but I do think he'd go to Liverpool, Man City, Man U, or Chelsea should they want him.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. It's definitely something you got to put out to the
Chris. Put it on Twitter.
masses.
We're not going to get a good result in the next 5 minutes as we close the pod. It will go out.
Do it quickly.
Well, no, we'll do. I think we'll try and do a preview ahead of the next game. So maybe that's one that we can discuss the results of then.
I do think this poll will set light very quickly, because I think there are arguments for and against it. I just think that people have gone to United. You got to have a lot of self-confidence, and this being the manager who literally bombed it for the second half at Leicester, and there was certain segments of Leicester fans who were losing faith in him. Mm-hmm. And that's got to take a knock on your own confidence. I mean, he's not. I do think that just like in any line of career, it's not such an easy decision. Like, you get a big carrot dangled for like this big job, but you're in your own head thinking, if this goes wrong, ultimately, financially you're probably stable, you get a huge payout, but are you ever going to get to that pinnacle of your career again without having to put a hell of a lot of work in? Whereas
I think ultimately you can say that Leicester's players and managers being linked away is a good thing for us in a way, though, isn't it? There's a positive to be taken there.
It's a sad shame, though, isn't it? The only time that we make mainstream media, if you like, or like talk sport or anything, is when our players are getting, or management are getting linked away. But yeah, it's a sign of the times, true. But I don't know. I think we'll see. Hopefully, well, I do think Pochettino is their number one choice personally, and I've said that for a long time. So I don't think it's realistically something that might even happen. Yeah. It's nice to be regarded in that sort of ballpark, at least.
I think Ollie is keeping that seat warm, isn't he? His time is probably ticking by. But look, that seems. I mean, it's been a hell of an episode. It's been very interesting listening to you two have it out again. It's been a little while, hasn't it? Obviously missed each other. But so I think there's a few polls and opinions that we need to put out to everyone, and then we'll try and hopefully get back together before a game, a title challenge battle at the top, as the media are already bringing it up to be. It's not really, is it? Let's be honest. But I mean, is there any other business? I always do ask before you close it off. Is there anything else you want to bring up?
If Ed's struggling, then let's just wrap it.
I have got one story to tell you.
Go on, then.
My musings of the day. Chris just made me think of something that happened earlier. I can't believe I'm going to say this because it's not funny and it's really weird. But it happened. Chris was on about the dangling the carrot. And earlier, Lauren was cooking. Lauren, for those listening, is my partner. And she yelped. And I didn't know what was going on. And she comes running up the stairs, laughing her head off. And she's like, "Look at this." And it was just a big carrot.
You need to tell us how big this carrot was. Add some context.
I don't know. How big's a big carrot?
Well, was it big? Did you look at it and go, "Wow, that is a big carrot"?
Wait, I'll tell you.
Oh, for God's sake! I don't think there are many questions.
This is it. They haven't even used the carrot. They deserve this carrot.
Massive.
But oh my God, this is.
Lauren, talk to us about this carrot. As a carrot correspondent.
Oh, I can't even video. Can I video? Oh, I wish I'd take it. I've got a video of me holding said carrot. No, but I've got a picture. Hold on, Chris.
I think pictures like this can go for a lot of money. I'm
going to send it you on Instagram.
Can we please follow us on Twitter to see a picture of a massive carrot? We'll put it out there.
You guys to shame. That's all I'm saying. It was huge. I couldn't believe it. I just whipped it out the bag.
Oh my God. This is we're suddenly going to have to be whacking some sort of like PG rating on the podcast.
Look at this.
I've got the photo in front. That is a big carrot. That is bigger. That is longer than your head. You'd struggle to get two hands around that.
Oh, right,
I
come
did.
on. Family podcast,
I'm
unbelievable.
going to say
Right,
this is a family show. I'm going to
yeah.
leave it at that.
That is, it's a face you're pulling whilst holding the carrot. That must have some
That's
weight.
the face I pull if it.
We'll leave it there.
God's
Leave
sake.
it there. Well, that was
Wow.
Lauren's debut with Carrot Talk.
Chris, whatever you do, don't upload the unedited file again. This has been absolute weirdness, hasn't it?
I mean,
So
to be
good.
fair, if someone's 1 hour 25 into a podcast,
Yeah, well done. You've made it this far. Your prize is we're going to start talking about local produce, and it's going to get really strange. Right, so we wrap it up. Is anyone even listening at this point? Does anyone even care?
Can you hear me?
maybe that's
No.
the sort of size carrot Brendan needs dangled in front of him.
Hey, we're back to Leicester City. Excellent, well done. Right, should we leave it there because this has been mad.
Austin, I know you're still listening. You need to show me. You have to be and Rich. Actually, no, Rich. Come on, one of you. You had to have listened this far.
First person to tweet us with a picture of a massive carrot wins a prize.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, please join us next week when we're going to preview Leicester's game against Liverpool. We're going to talk about the internationals and hopefully no more injuries to report. And Ed will introduce us all to his newest feature, Vegetable of the Week.
Yeah, I'm back now. Just
Oh.
to say, if anyone is listening and wants to see this carrot, let us know and we'll send you a picture.
Yeah.
Ed's offering to send pictures of carrots to people. That new depth.
You know what? I can't even finish that one. Ed, you wrap it up this week. You've done the damage to our reputation.
Why can't you finish it?
Right.
Well,
Please
need to wrap
join
it
us
up.
next week. Tune in next week. Like, rate, subscribe. Thank you very much for listening. This has been a pleasure and a horror. But we hope you come back for the love of God. We'll see you next time.